Okay, good afternoon. Today we are going to read the poem by John Donne. The title of the poem is The Indifferent. I think all of you did the translation of this poem, and do you find it difficult? Can you understand what it means? What's the meaning of the poem? Okay, we are reading an essay right now, and why don't you go to page 20, 200. Second paragraph. This paragraph is about this poem, right? And the author is talking about what it means, right? Moreover, when one looks back at the Elegy, within the awareness of Donne's lifelong effort to find a philosophic reconciliation for the conflicting claims of the soul and of the body in his personal experience, this section has the effect of certainly adding a new dimension to Donne's treatment of sexual experience in the poem, a dimension which is entirely lacking in Donne's assumption of the poetic role of sexual libertine and the indifferent. Up to this point, the Elegy has presented unreflecting passion, unreflectingly. The play of Donne's intellect over this material has been directed into elaborating conceits which have little or no philosophic import, but the sustained philosophic overtones of the concluding section finally place the sexual act in a metaphysical context. Here, Donne's mind seems certainly to peer through the flesh to see what this act means. The shock of these lines is the intellectual shock of what he sees. In effect, they present the wholehearted acceptance, sensual satisfaction as an act, which entails taking a philosophic option, which forces one to embrace the philosophic materialism and to reject completely the doctrines of philosophic idealism. To reject, in fact, the fundamental doctrines of Christianity. In these lines, Donne's celebration of lust becomes really and substantially metaphysical. Now, do you understand? And in this poem, the author, the speaker, agrees to the freedom of making love to anyone, right? But is it a real thing? Maybe metaphysically only, right? Okay, let's go. We stopped. Where did we stop last time? Page 190. We have to begin from paragraph 2, second paragraph. Before re-examining the details with which Donne develops the conceit, we might pause to reflect on how a Renaissance reader would react to this analogy. Certainly the most startling of all Donne's paradoxes. The basic conceit not only equates the sinful pleasures of flesh with the pure bliss of heaven, but in fact it also equates the soul with the body, since it identifies the full intellectual joys of the naked soul with the full sensual joys of naked body. Donne thus obliterates by a single stroke of wit that sharp dichotomy between sense and reason, body and soul, temporal matter and eternal spirit, things visible and things invisible, which was not only the central organizing concept in his own thought, but also one of the fundamental conceptual antitheses in the thought of the whole Renaissance. the bright young man who set himself up at the start of his literary career as a special practitioner in the shock effect of witty paradox never devised a more shocking paradox than this. So his poetry is unique, right? He tried to combine the two elements, right? The physical and the spiritual, right? But the perverse wit of this passage would have a further and more specific point for the Elizabethan reader when one reads the poem in the context of the love debate which runs through Elizabethan love poetry. It seems certain that Donne's irrelevant allusions to spiritual love and to the beatific vision and the climactic section of a poem celebrating the pleasures of purely physical love could be intended only as a ridicule of the school of Platonic love. Really? Yeah. The clothing metaphor on which the conceit is based was a conventional analogy, not only in Christian mysticism but also in Renaissance Platonism. Though the details of Donne's phrasing and some of the analogies which he uses suggest that his actual source for the doctrines on which the conceit is based was Christian mythical literature rather than the writings of Renaissance Platonists. The logical progression which is suggested by the analogies in these lines is nevertheless that of the Platonic progression up the stair of love. In fact, the details of the conceit in this passage take on logical continuity only when one supplies the theory of Platonic love as an implied philosophic context. The poetic proposition of this section of the Elegy asserts, in effect, that loving a woman's naked body is philosophically equivalent to loving her soul. Very paradoxical. And that consummation in sexual intercourse and consummation on the mystical experience add up to pretty much the same thing. Can you believe it? In Buddhism, there is special kind of Buddhism, right? And the Buddha is what? There are men and women in sexual act or embrace, and that's the object for what? Worship, right? So the moment they reach the climax is the moment they get enlightenment, things like that, right? So up to, okay, and that one might think that would dispose of the Platonists once and for all. But this passage of the poem is closer scrutiny because the powerful shock of Donne's conceit derived chiefly from the rich philosophic and theological implications of the precise details with which he elaborates the basic analogy. The technique of the passage is extremely compressed. Donne throws out in quick succession a series of literary or philosophic commonplaces which are intended to call up to the reader's mind the whole systematic body of thought. In order to make clear the logical pattern which gives continuity to the suggestions of each of these details, I will confine my commentary at this point purely to the imaginative implication of the passage without posing to point out what each of the details of Donne's conceit actually refer to in terms of facts of the situation which the poem presents. It may be useful, therefore, to set out at the start the basic imaginative equations on which Donne builds the entire structure of metaphor in these lines. Okay, for example, A, as the fundamental equations, body is clothed. The soul is naked body. And therefore, ordinary sensual lovers are the same as lovers who are content with women who keep their clothes on. And enlightened Platonic lovers are enlightened lovers like the speaker who want women naked. Finally, lines 42 to 45, God is the mistress's naked body. The beautiful vision is the sexual orgasm. The pseudo-logical premise of this fanciful argument is laid down at the start in lines 45 to 34 to 35. As souls embodied, bodies unclothed must be, to taste whole joys. These lines refer to the intellectual joys which the soul can experience fully only by direct contact with God in heaven. The joys of mortal life, by contrast, are partial. Since the soul, while it is imprisoned in the earthly body, can know God only mediately through the distorting veil of sense experience. The soul's yearning for the whole joys of immediate intellectual apprehension of God's essence can therefore be satisfied only when it strips the fleshly clothing of the body, when the soul is unbodied. For most women, the soul can be unbodied only after death, but a few chosen spirits are privileged to know this bliss at certain moments during mortal life, when the souls are temporarily withdrawn from their bodies in the mystic experiences, or, to use Donne's normal terminology, in an ecstasy. There are the full doctrinal implications of the first two lines of the conceit. My rather specific expansion of this philosophic suggestion is based on Donne's development of these ideas in the lines which follow, and particularly on the implicit reference to the soul's apprehension of God's essence in lines 43 to 5. But the doctrines are so much a commonplace in the formal thought of the Renaissance that an alert and philosophically sophisticated contemporary reader might have guessed what Donne was doing from these lines alone. In the following lines, the imagery defines more fully the implications of line 34 to 5 and outlines the process by which a mortal may attain whole joys. If one responds only to the suggestions of Donne's structure of metaphor and neglects the factual reference of these lines, the following ordered philosophic argument plays above this section of the poem like continuous, discordant, obbligato, clashing violently at every note with what Donne is actually saying. The process of attaining whole joys will start, lines 35 to 8, with the love of earthly women. But this love must not be sensual. Women's bodies, gems, line 35, clothes, appeal, to be sure, to man's physical senses, views, and the sense of sight, but this sexual appeal is superficial and will attract only the unenlightened lovers, fools. These lovers misdirect their love into sensuality because that is all which their minds can comprehend. They have earthly souls which give them the faculties of physical sensation, but they lack the higher faculty of reason, which should distinguish man from the beast. Therefore, their love is distracted, the Atlanta analogy, from its popular object. It is spent in physical desire for the inessential temporal bodies of women, theirs, instead of being rationally directed toward women's metaphysical essences, their eternal soul, them. But, line 39 to 40, these sensual lovers misunderstand God's purpose in creating physical beauty if they believe that beautiful women are intent to serve no further end than physical satisfaction. God created beautiful bodied women for a purpose analogous to the Church's use of religious picture to instill faith in the layman. The Church does not intend the pictures to be enjoyed simply in themselves and to provide mere pleasures for the senses. They are intended, rather, to give to ordinary man who acquire knowledge solely through their senses a visual experience of beauty which should lead them to the higher supra-sensory understanding that comes from reason and faith. And on the same ground, these men who are intellectually incapable of direct, rational response to the content of a sacred book may be drawn indirectly to the knowledge which it offers through their sensory responses to its beautiful built binding. For the same reason, God has arrayed woman's soul, her essence, in a physically beautiful body. She has done this in order that the ordinary man, layman, after responding to the initial sensory attraction, may be led beyond this physical experience to a rational response to the beauty of a soul, and thus to an awareness of the eternal reality of spirit, of which the beautiful body is merely a transitory physical manifestation. What do you think? You are attracted to a beautiful woman, and then the relation fall apart. What happens? You are what? What kind of? You're superficial, right? First, you may be attracted to a woman because she is beautiful, but after that, you should be in love with her soul, right? This is the logic, right? The superior lovers, we, on the other hand, neither desire nor need their intermediate sensory step to attain the intellectual enlightenment, which is the proper end of love. Having renounced sensuality, they feel only a rational abstraction to the intellectual beauty of women's soul, themselves, them, as things from theirs. They desire to apprehend their souls directly by seeing the souls divested of their fleshly clothing. Themselves we must see revealed. At this point in the poem, lines 42 to 3, Donne's language takes on a specifically theological reference. This shift in the connotative suggestions of his diction produces a quick remediative transition. It suggests that in the metaphoric structure of the conceit, Donne is no longer thinking merely of the women's souls as an example of the kind of metaphysical essence which may be apprehended by the enlightened lover, but has turned his thought instead to the essence of God. What actually happens here, as Donne elaborates the logic of his conceit, is that his imagination suddenly takes a quick skip up several steps of the Platonic stair. According to the doctrine of the Platonists, the lover who has learned to love the beauty of his mistress soul and rise above the attraction of a bodily beauty has reached only the first step in the stair of love. As he progresses up the logical steps of the stair, he proceeds to a love of beauty of all women, then to the formulation of a universal concept beauty that is surely spread over all the nature of man, and finally to the awareness of God as the fountain of the sovereign and the right beauty. He sees then that the consummation which his amorous soul desires is that of being hailed from the body and coupled with God in the mystic experience. Donne's imagination jumped to his final stage of the Platonic progression in lines 42-3 as he elaborates the hint contained in the word mystic. See revealed carries strong theological overtones. It suggests a desire for a supernatural revelation of God rather than for a mere apprehension of a woman's soul. That this transition has been accomplished, that in the imaginative structure of the concept of the spiritual essence of woman themselves has shaded over into the logically analogous concept of the essence of God, and that the Platonic lover is now desiring to see God revealed in the beauty of vision is made clear by line 42, which implies that the revelation will come through the lovers receiving imputed grace. Donne here uses a technical term from theology to imply a specific theological doctrine, a doctrine which would not need to be introduced into the poem if the erotic experience to which the conceit alludes at this point were nothing beyond the Platonic lover's rational apprehension of the intellectual beauty of a woman's soul. For this kind of the intellectual pre-apprehension, the imputation of grace would not be required, but God's grace would have to be imputed before a mortal could enjoy the mystic ecstasy. The mystic experience was not regarded by Christian theologians as in any way an automatic reward for the platonic love, for lover, or for the Christian mystic who mortified the flesh and followed the prescribed regimen of devotion. It was a privilege granted to few men in this life, and they did not receive it by virtue of any inherent right or any righteousness to which they could attain as mortals. Moreover, from the standpoint of Christian theology, the apprehension of God's essence, which resulted from the experience, did not come from through any natural powers that their souls possessed. The beautiful vision was granted to the soul, and the soul was enabled to experience it only through God's special imputation of grace to a being who was inherently neither worthy nor capable of the experience. Donne's reference to this doctrine then in lines 42 to 3, in conjunction with the word mystic in the preceding line, implies that the lover seeks a special dispensation which will enable him to pass beyond the union of soul with an earthly woman to the consummation of his love through the union of his naked soul with God. The following lines, 43 to 5, climax Donne's development of the basic conceit and finally defines specifically the philosophic implications of the reference to the whole joys of souls embodied at the beginning of the passage. If one responds merely to their imaginative implication and neglects their factual reference, their lines suggest the lover's prayer to God to impute to him the grace which will permit him to experience the mystic ecstasy. They are a plea to God to manifest His essence so fully. Liberally show thyself, that the desires of the lover's soul may be completely satisfied. This satisfaction is the experience of the whole joys referred to in line 35. It will consist in knowing. Line 43, and at this point Donne alludes to one of the key biblical texts which provide authority for the concept of the beautiful vision in Christian theology. The soul joy in the mystic ecstasy will consist in the satisfaction of his thirst for knowledge through a complete comprehension of metaphysical reality, which, since the soul is embodied, will be revealed without the distortions of the veil of sense and can thus be apprehended by the soul directly and intellectually. It may be necessary at this point to issue a reminder that this elaborate structure of philosophic idealism in the specialized forms of the doctrines of Platonic love and Christian mysticism exists in the poem merely an imaginative analog to the factual implications of Donne's conceit in these lines. Considered in terms of its denotation, the passage is actually a pseudo-logical presentation of the metaphysic of lust. Donne's real subject is the sheer physical pleasure of sexual intercourse. Donne brings his readers down to earth and drives home the shock of his general conceit by sprinkling the prayer in lines 43 to 45 with sexual puns. He puns first on the sexual meaning of no, and then on liberally, which carries a Renaissance ambiguity of lewdly, and on show, which is an indecent Renaissance colloquialism for sexual exposure. These ambiguities give the lines a tonal quality which is far from delicate, but Donne's final thrust is reserved for the word self in line 45. In line 41, selves refer on the poem's factual level to a woman's naked body, but the ambiguity on show and the precise anatomical suggestions of the phrase as liberally as to the midwife hint the reference of the word in line 45 and make clear that self in that line refers not to the woman's body as a whole, but rather to her genitals, right? This twist in the reference of the word is enforced also by the suggestion of the imagery of these lines. This imagery equates the mystic's passionate desire to see the innermost depth of God's essence with the lustful lover's desire to see sexually essential part of the mistress' naked body. The modern secularized reader might pause at this point to consider the effect of these lines for the reader of a theologically religious age. They do nothing less than identify woman's genitals with the essence of God. How about you? You equate it with the essence of God, genitals, or the essence of God? The lover's imagination has now returned from metaphysical acrobatics to concrete fact. And he thinks of the moment when the mistress, in the sequence of events that he anticipates, will have removed all her clothes except her shift. The theological preoccupation of the preceding lines carries over into his final command to her, as he ironically compares her white linen to the ecclesiastical garb of virgins and religious penitents. Cast all ye this white linen hands, here is no penance, much less innocence. And the poem's argument for the desirability of undressing concludes in a summary point of it, as the lover puns on the sexual meaning of covering. The Elegy shows Donne as a brilliant apprentice who is still short of technical mastery. It is an uneven performance, ordinary in some passages, dazzling in others, though it shows more sense of form than most of Donne's elegies. The poem as a whole lacks the clear imaginative organization and precise formal definition of its mature work. And the closing section, lines 33 and so on, certainly makes extraordinary demands on the reader. Donne's conception in these lines is brilliant, but it is only partly realized in the execution. In this passage, he certainly pays heavily in loss of clarity for what he gained through compression. And I wonder how many of his contemporaries could have followed the skittering of his speculative imagination through these lines. In fact, I wonder how many of them would have noticed at all the high-powered intellectual activity which goes on at this point, beneath the bright, sleek surface of the poem. On the other hand, in its dramatic power, in its adventurousness of its imaginative conjunctions, and in its vividness of its shock effect, the Elegy belongs with Donne's finest work. I agree, right? The final tonal poem and the precise state of mind behind it are a little hard to define. In many ways, the Elegy seems simply a poem of juice and high spirit. It is verse of flash and glitter, the display of a young virtuoso who is showing what he can do with the themes of Ovidian poetry by playing them on his own instrument. But though I think this was probably Donne's initial intention in the poem, there is a good deal left over when one tries to define the temper of the poem in this way. For one thing, the formal rhetoric of the Elegy gives it qualities of weight and dignity which are lacking in most of the Renaissance erotic verse in the Ovidian tradition. And certain parts of the poem carry a voltage which is far beyond the potential of the conventional Ovidian verse of witty and sophisticated indecency. The evocative power of the exploration metaphor in lines 25 to 32 and the climactic effect in lines 33 to 45. As Donne derived the logical implications of his conceit with utter ruthlessness to a culminating intellectual shock, are of the order of intensity of serious poetry. This final section of the poem seems, in the last analysis, much more than a piece of outrageous intellectual impudence on Donne's part. When one turns back to this poem after having read the Ecstasy, the canonization, valediction, forbidding mourning, and the good moral, the concluding section takes on a different character. One of the peculiar characters of those later love poems is Donne's use of extravagant intellectual ingenuity as a mode of expression for strong feeling. In these poems, the florid virtuosity of wit is not, as the 18th century and the Romantic critics thought, a force in artistic conflict with emotion. It is simply Donne's poetic vehicle for emotion. When read in the context of Donne's later work, these lines in Elegy 19 appear as some of his most passionate love poetry, and the tonal pattern of the last half of the poem seems not that of an impassioned climax in lines 25 to 32, followed by a passage of virtuoso cleverness, but rather that of a continuous crescendo of emotion to a point of incandescent intensity. Moreover, I'll skip the paragraph. We've gone through it. Third paragraph. Furthermore, the rough treatment which Donne gives to the mystic experience in these passages shows a remarkable conceptual accuracy, reflects an interest in the subject which is clearly more than casual. And this poem's identification of sexual intercourse, sexual experience with religious mysticism echoes throughout the serious love poetry and religious poetry of Donne's maturity, as well as in some of the great prose passages in his sermons. It reappears most strikingly in the Ecstasy, where the same comparison is presented in a different key, this time with essential seriousness, as an analogy with genuine psychological and metaphysical validity. I think it would be forcing a point to insist that these potential emotional intellectual implications are of primary importance in the fact of the last section of this elegy. They are present in the passage only as over and undertone, but they give to the lines a fullness of resonance, which is not the tonal quality of verse that is witly indistinct. What seems to have happened in the writing of Elegy 19 is like what evidently happened in the apparition. That piece of mordant realism which takes off from one of the most artificial conventions of Petrarchan, vers de société. I think when Donne started to write the elegy, he probably planned to write a piece of clever erotic verse in the Ovidian manner, but some of what came out after this material was processed by a powerful literary imagination was, for all its high-spirited gaiety, not light verse at all. I think then that the artistic paradox of the elegy is mixture of bumptious, perverse wit with excited philosophic speculation and the strong emotion is never fully resolved in the poem. Probably, the poem as a whole was never brought to complete definition in Donne's mind. It grew on him as he wrote. And I think that for all its brilliance, the poem never quite assumed shape as an artistic whole, but for the student of Donne's poetry, the elegy provides one of the earliest glimpses of the major poet latent in the bright young man, who was a great visitor of ladies and great frequenter of plays, a great writer of conceived verses. And the poem reveals also the identity of mind and temperament which lies beneath the surface, contrast between Donne's secular verse in the elegies and the songs and sonnets, and his religious verse in the divine poems. In his later years, when he was Dean of St. Paul's and the most powerful and sensational preacher of his day, Donne sometimes dramatized his assumption of a new role in life by thinking of his career as divided between two lives. Jack Donne, who had written the witty and paradoxical work of his early career, and Dr. John, who was writing the sermons. But the sharp dichotomy was a theatricality of Donne's imagination. it's not surprising that in trying to elucidate the difficulties of Jack Donne's poem, I've found some of the most helpful commentary in Dr. John's sermons. Okay, in order to understand his poetry, particularly the religious poetry, you have to read his sermons too. His essays. I can love both fair and brown. Her whom abundant melts, and her whom one betrays. Her who loves loneliness the best. Her who masculine plays. Her whom the country form, whom the town. Her who believes, and her who tries. Her who still sweeps with spongy eyes. Her who is dry cork and never cries. I can love her and you, I can love any, so she be not true. Will no other vice content you? Will it not serve your turn to do as did your mother's? Have your old vices spent, now to find out others? Or doth the fear that men are true and torment you? Oh, we are not, be not you so. Let me and to you 20 know. Rob me, but without bind me not, and let me go. Let me and to you 20 know. Rob me, but bind me not, and let me go. Must I, who came to travel through you, grow your fixed subject because you are true? Venus heard me sigh this song, and by love's sweetest part, variety she swore, she heard not this till now, and it should be so, no wise. She went, examined, returned ere long, and said alas, come 2 or 3 poor heretics in love there be, which think to establish dangerous constancy. But I've told you, since you will be true, you shall be true to them who are false to you. Can you understand? It's like a puzzle, right? Okay, let's go back. Indifferent. What does it mean? Indifferent. You're indifferent. Make no discrimination, right? Indifferent. What does it mean? Women are the same, right? Women fair and blonde, black or white. You can love any woman. Wow. Can you do that? No, not yet. Right? But this poem is saying that, right? The indifferent. I can love both fair and brown. I can love both fair and brown. What kinds of women, right? Fair. Fair woman, dark woman, right? Brown, right? I can love both fair and brown. Her whom abundance melts, the woman whose abundance melts. Abundant melts, maybe voluptuous, fully grown, right? Mature woman. Her whom abundance, her whose abundance melts. Her whose abundance melts, and her whom one betrays. Who betrays. Betrays is a very unique word. Betray, right? Very complex word. Betray. Right? Inspired with yourself. You fall in love with the woman. Betray. Her who loves loneliness best. Her who loves loneliness best. Her who masks and plays. So all kinds of women. All different kinds of women. Her whom the country formed. The woman, the country formed. The countryside, the country form, or the woman, the townfolk. So the woman who grew up in the country, in the city, the woman who grew up in the countryside, right? And he can love both the woman of a girl, of a city or from a countryside, right? So her home, the country form, the home, the town. Her who believed, what does it mean? Maybe Christian, religious, devout woman, right? So her who believes and her who tries. She's not a Christian, but she goes to church. She wants to be a believer, right? So her who still sweeps with the spongy eyes, her who still sweeps with spongy eyes, spongy eyes? Spongy eyes? You weep, right? Spongy eyes, right? So what kind of woman is this? Very sentimental, right? She tends to cry, right? If you say some harsh things to her, she will cry, right? Her who believes, her who tries, her who still sweeps with spongy eyes, her who is dry cork. Wonderful expression, the expression. Look at it. Well, she has a dry cork. She never cries, no matter what kind of, no matter what you say. She does not respond. She does not cry. Right? So what does it mean? All kinds of woman, right? So and her who is dry cork, and never cries. Okay. And I can love her. Okay. I can love her. I can love her. I can love her. Right? And you and every woman. I can love all kinds of women. What a poem is it? I can love her and you. I can love any. So she be not true. Whether she is true or not, it doesn't matter. Right? Will no other vice content you? Will no other vice content you? Will it not serve your turn to do, as did your mother's? Have you all vices? Have you spent all vices? Did you part with all vices? Right? Now, or find out others, or does the fear? The verb is torment. Does the fear torment you that men are true, or we are not, or be not you, so you are not so. Let me, or do you, 20 no. What does it mean? 20. 20 is a pronoun. 20 women, 20 different kinds of person, right? So let me know 20. 20 is a lot of women, right? In your whole life, how many women can you love? Maybe one or two or three, or less than half a dozen. But 20, that's a lot, right? So let me know 20. Know is what? Experienced woman, right? Have a relationship with woman, right? So let me and do you 20 know. Let me and do you 20 no. There is an inversion here, no 20. Rob me. Wonderful. Right? Rob me and bind me not and let me go. Let me free, right? Rob me and bind me not. Let me go. Rob me not, bind me not. Okay? Rob me not and bind me not. Let me go. Let me go. Must I? Where is the verb? Must I grow your fixed subject? Must I become your subject? Right? Must I become your fixed subject? No. Let me go away from you. Right? Let me leave you. Okay? Must I grow your fixed subject? Who came to travel through you? Through you means through you. Travail means travel, sometimes. Because you are true. Venus heard me sigh this song, sigh, sing a song, sigh this song, sigh this song. Venus heard me sigh this song, and by love's sweetest part, variety should swear. She swore variety by love's sweetest part. She heard not this till now, and that it should be so no more. She went. What does she refer to here? Venus, right? She went, she examined, returned here wrong, before wrong, and said, alas. This is what Venus said, quotation, right? Alas, some 2 or 3 poor heretics in love there be, right? Which think, which means, which is, in modern English, which is in here is who, right? Okay, which heretics who think to establish dangerous constancy. But I have told them, since you will be true, you shall be true to them who are false to you. So this is an amazing poem, right? This is quite different from other love poems, other poems, as Clay Hunt said in his essays, right? Says in his essay. So this is a very strange poem. And next time we are going to read a religious poem and 2 long poems and an essay about these 2 poems. Okay. Okay, see you next week. Thank you.